Good morning, fish keepers. Cam here from the fishroom.co.nz. We've done it. We've made it through another week. We've made it to Friday. It's also a public holiday here in New Zealand, which means that we are closed. The retail shop is closed today, and I'm also taking tomorrow off. So over this weekend, the shop itself will not be open. Apologies to everybody who was going to come in. The online store is obviously still functioning, but yeah, our physical shop is not open today or tomorrow. That is enough dribble. We have a guest sitting in the back. We'll bring our guest on and we will get on with Fanatics Friday Coffee Date. Good morning, good afternoon, Luke. How are you?
Not too bad. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you very much for coming on with us. It's much appreciated.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Cool. All right, also, before I forget, John, who normally runs the stream with us, is not here today. His wife and his kids bought him tickets to the Killers as a Father's Day present, and it just happens to be scheduled right now. So for those wondering where John is, he is not here. He is rocking his head off at a concert, and we're going to be talking about fish and aquariums. So, hey, it is what it is.
I suppose I can forgive being not that important.
So my first question to you is, what sparked your interest in keeping tropical fish? Or aquariums in general?
So when I was in college, I was a jewelry and metal arts major. And when we graduate, we all do a show. And so at the time, I just started doing praying mantises, actually. I kept first. And then I decided to use fish that were native to a specific country to illustrate enclosed populations of humans due to some aspect of U.S. foreign policy. And then I used bronze and copper cast and fabricated stuff to represent U.S. foreign policy in the region. That was 4 aquariums that were different, pretty loose biotopes, and then it kind of evolved from there. I had 1 aquarium in my apartment at the time, and then within a month it was 10. And then I had graduated and I was working a couple jobs here and there, and then I started working at the local fish store, and it became much easier to access lots of things.
Very cool. Very cool. Can you tell us about the first fish that you actually kept?
You mean like as a kid that we killed, or?
Oh, if that happens to be your first one, sure. Or physically you went to a shop and the man, this is the fish for me, I want to give this one a go.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had some random stuff that I don't really remember in a little tank by the window when I was a kid. They never lasted long, you know.
Yeah.
But when I got back into it, I think the first thing I got was a pair. No, it was a group of 6 juvenile Epistogramma cockatoides.
Cool.
That ended up going into the Colombian tank in the amongst the 4 that I was telling you about a second ago.
Cool.
They ended up breeding for me, and me being the way that I am, I was like, okay, Epistos are cool. Now I need to have the entire genus. And, you know, obviously I still haven't completed that collection yet. That's ever growing, and I probably never will, but you always branch out from there. And I only had Epistos for a while, and it was just those tanks of Epistos. And I bred a pair of Abacaxes, the purple-faced yellow ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of got me connected with some more people. And then, you know, long story short, here I
am. We do have I've got a few questions for you about Epistogramma, so we'll just hold fire on them for the time being, because I think that'll be a topic that we can probably dig quite deep into, which would be cool. Did you have any influential figures or mentors who kind of guided you in your earlier times of keeping aquariums?
I was on the internet a lot when I first started, and then found YouTube, but I really I enjoyed just researching a species. So I would use like FishBase, Seriously Fish, those normal
Mhm,
online
mhm,
resources.
mhm.
And then um, I wish I had photos of back then, but I just kind of had fun. I used to blow glass a bit in college, so I worked with a friend of mine. We made a big cylinder, put a hole, maybe 4-inch hole on the side of it, and then I did one of those reverse fish tank things, and it kind of
Mhm.
sat in the bottom, but it was about 2 feet tall, so sitting on the bottom of a 10-gallon, it was still about a foot above the water.
Cool.
And, things went in there, but it was less successful than I wanted it to be. And it's really hard to clean the algae that grows in there.
I have always wondered how that they went for cleaning the algae off the inside of that. It seems like it would be a bit of a nightmare to do it.
Yeah, melamine pads work pretty well. I made
Hmm.
sure that my hand would fit inside the hole,
Yeah, yeah.
but I still never wanted to do it. Every time I did it, it would be a commitment to rearranging the things that are in there. And I had some stems in there at the time, and they grew okay, but they made the little bubble up on top, so you'd always have to suck the air back out, and
Yeah,
it was annoying.
yeah. I just want to step back a little bit and talk about the 4 aquariums that you first talked about, because I'm still sitting on that from a couple minutes ago. Can you explain them a little bit more, please?
Sure. So the 4 aquariums were 4 regional, um, pretty loose biotopes. One was around Colombia,
Hmm.
and I had some Colombian native fish with some plants, and then I fabricated an abandoned cocaine factory, and that was brass, copper, etc. And so that was to represent the hand that we've had in. Uh, Hopefully, your stream doesn't get flagged here.
We'll see how we
That's
go.
to represent our hand in importing the drugs and the effect that it's had on the less wealthy populations in urban US. Uh, and that's decimated lots of rainforest back in the day.
Hmm.
So then there was also Vietnam, that you know, a bunch of civilians here had an issue with even at the time. Uh, but I made these fire bombs, and at the time, napalm was widely used. And when you have gel fire, that's not super fun for all the locals.
Hmm.
So then I cast, the little plastic Green Army dudes that you play with as a kid? I
Hmm.
cast those in copper and bronze and kind of assembled them around the aquascape to be shooting at each other. Um, there were some Tanichthyes make a gemme in there. I got those around the same time as I got those Epistos, and I have God knows how many still generations later, so I've still got those fish. Um, there was also a Japanese tank, and I cast like I burned out it was a lost wax investment, but I used expanding foam actually to make a little mushroom cloud. And then I had an Iwagumi scape in there, and on the day that the show opened, I kind of cut right in the middle of the carpet and lifted it up, and then put the put the mushroom cloud in. And the last one was the Congo and the deforestation in the area with the palm oil plantations and cutting down the rainforest to make room for other stuff. So it was like a tilled copper sheet field that had holes in it on the mounds, and then there was some Indian native Pogostemon erectus inside the holes, since since the palms come from India natively.
Hmm. I'm not going to lie, that sounds awesome. intense and very precise to what I feel that you're probably trying to achieve with it. So that is pretty
Well,
cool.
I do want to say, since I was talking about it, that looking back on it, I feel like it didn't go as well as it could have.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you want to make an impact when you do an installation. So I sort of cherry picked the negative aspects of US foreign policy that I could think of at the time that were the most, that I thought the audience would relate to most. Um, but I can't say that the US has not made a positive impact in specific other countries. So that should have been highlighted probably.
Yeah.
And honestly, what really inspired me to do it, and then I had to abandon the idea of, was back then I was pretty closely following the Israel-Palestine events. And to be honest, recently I can't bring myself to keep on following it so closely. But at the time, I wanted to have a tank that had a solid wall down the center and have a filter intake on one side and the outflow on the other, and have just enough water for that filter to work on the one
Yeah.
side,
Yeah.
and just have it sort of slowly trickle over and throw a couple fish on both sides that would be the same species. But I ran into the problem of not being able to get anything in that was
Mm-hmm.
native to the region. So it would have looked pretty awful, most likely.
Well,
Yeah, I apologize if
no,
if this isn't something you want to talk about. I totally understand. It was very political.
Yes, it was very political. I think that it is amazing that someone has, you've allowed your brain to work and then come out into an aquarium to that sort of scenario, if that makes sense. Like that to me is quite phenomenal. It's yeah, I find that really interesting and really, really creative. I think that's fantastic. Was it saying
Thank
that
you.
was graded on or something on those lines? Like I think from memory you said it was for like a project for a class or something like that. Is that right?
It was basically just my personal show. It's supposed to be uh, the culmination of everything you've done with your 4 years in school, I suppose.
You're right. Yeah, cool. Cool. Wow. That I think that is really incredibly cool. So thank you for sharing that. That's yeah, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Try and segue back into the questions that we've had. Now we've had that. Do you have any disaster stories from earlier in your days in the hobby?
I honestly can't really think of any. I was pretty careful when I first started keeping fish personally. When I started working at the fish store, I was pretty much in charge of running the quarantine room there and getting in the new fish and this and that. So during those days, I had quite a few, but most of those are because DOA and the shipment just came in really bad. So what can you do? I think I've always been pretty anal about how I've been doing things, because I started in the apartment on the second floor with carpet under me. So, there have been a couple floods here and there, but nothing more than half gallon, a gallon, which is quite a bit better than a lot of people experience. So I don't know if I'm allowed to moan about that as a disaster.
Yeah, no, that's very, very minimal compared to a lot of situations.
Yeah, and small buckets, small tanks, just do it often. Even now, I have a lot more ergonomic a setup now in the fish room, but
Yeah.
I still just do water changes really often, and I'm there, and I just watch it. I usually have something on in the background audio wise, but I'm just there. It only takes me an hour and a half to change the whole fish room, so not the worst thing.
So when you say you do water changes often, how is your water changing or your maintenance schedule? What does that look like for you?
About 60% every 3 days.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Yep. And how many aquariums is that over?
Things have been getting shuffled, but somewhere between 35 and 50.
Okay, cool. Cool. Yeah, that is uh pretty intense. I know a lot of people that don't manage to get 60% every 3 months, so it's not bad at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, I made it easy on myself. I kind of plumbed a drain bucket. It's on a vinyl that I can carry around in the fish room and just drain into those. And then outside, I have a PVC hard plumbing that goes to the orange tree. I have them separate so that I can keep closing the screen door. And then I have separate siphons for every tank that I just, well, not every, I have 8 siphons that I cycle through, and then I sanitize them in between every tank. So I just
All right.
grab it, move it, and then I drain everything and then fill straight from the hose, which is pretty decently high pressure. So
Mhm. Cool. What do you use for sanitation between each change?
NADCC, you know, Spa 56, the
I've,
spa
I've
shop.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, a friend of mine told me back when he was playing around with doing tissue cultures that it worked really well and it was pH neutral, so it was a little easier on the plants than bleach. But if it's good enough to tissue culture with, then I feel pretty confident as a sanitizer for me.
Yeah, 100% for sure. Cool.
It's
Right.
basically a really strong hot tub solution.
Cool. So you've mentioned apistogrammas already so far. What species of apistogramma have you kept or are you currently keeping?
Uh, it's a memory test now. Okay, I started with cockatoides, triple reds. Then I got some Borellii. I got Borellii blue and Borellii opal, the 2 strains. Then I got some. Then I got some Agassizi double reds, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got those Abacaxis. And then I got some. And some of these have left the fish room by now. I'm not really listing those as they leave, but I have the Abacaxis, and then after that I got some Biteniata. Cannot remember the collection point now. And then after that, I opened up a little bit and got some Dicrossus filamentosus and maculatus, which are not apistos, but kind of similar. You know, they're
Yeah.
little dwarf cichlids.
Yeah.
And then branched out a little more, got some Nanochromis. So I have Nanochromis splendens and Transvestitus. And then I got some Agassizi Tefe blues. I got some Agassizi blue flames. I got a different wild form of Cockatoides. I got Alacrina D18s. And I believe that's it.
This is the first time I think we've spoken to someone who's sort of right into the apistogramma dwarf cichlid sort of world. Spoke to like corridors and plecos and tetranyx. This is the first time we've been in the kind of apisto world, which I think is kind of cool because every facet of fish keeping has these people that are just engrossed in this particular family genus of fish, and it's great hearing other people's experiences and times and thoughts and why they're into this specific type of fish. So what's drawing you to the apistogrammas?
Honestly, I got those for the project. That's when I started attending the San Francisco Fish Club at the time, since I was out in that Bay Area, and I was looking for specific stuff. I had this list of potential candidates for the project that I was doing, and the first one that I got was those Apistos. And while I was getting things ready for the show, they had bred, and that excited me. So I just kind of dove in. It really was sort of happen chance.
Excellent. We've had a couple of questions on the floor. Let's bring our first one up here. Favorite plants to grow immersed. I have a huge African water fern, a couple feet tall, coming out of my pond that I absolutely love. So what would your favorite plants to be growing immersed?
Do they need to be able to grow submersed? Because
Cool.
I have a rather extensive houseplant collection too.
Okay, so we wait for Brenton to get back with that one. And the other one we have is, look, do you keep any Australian native fish?
I did have a group of Radnocentris ornatus from Ceres Creek in the tank behind me, but I may or may not have neglected the tank a bit and gassed all of the fish in there.
Bugger. It's not ideal.
Currently, no, but I am probably going to replace those because I really like the Radnocentris. They're great.
Brenton has got back to us with yes, aquarium plants, please.
Okay. Anubias is really nice. I have a few variegated ones of those that have really nice expression. And the Bulbitis is really good too. I don't know if you can... Oh, that's not what I wanted. Let's see. So here... I have this mangrove, and this Java fern is kind of climbing up. If it will focus towards the back. You can see the rhizome of it is sort of wrapped around the mangrove trunk, and it's growing up out of here. So surprisingly, that's right on the vent of the AC. It's right on the AC vent, and yet it's growing just fine.
Cool.
So that really surprised me. I've enjoyed that recently.
Excellent. Do you have a particular, back to the Pistogrammas. Do you have a favorite species or particular memorable experience with the Pistogrammas that you want to share with us?
Yeah, the Abacaxis really are the prettiest one I've seen, I think. Maybe it's just because I'm partial to purple, but they're really, really nice when they're displaying. And I realized at the time that I needed to drop my pH for them to breed, because that's what I had read on the internet. And so I started doing it, and it slowly went down, and they were healthy and happy, and they were breeding. Eggs were fungusing. Eggs were still fungusing, dropped the pH lower and lower, ended up at 3.5.
Wow. That is low.
Yeah. Luckily, at the time, I didn't have RO, but my tap water was super soft.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder now, but I do have RO now. If I hadn't had really soft tap water, there's no way that would have happened for me.
Yeah. Wow, that's phenomenally low.
Yep.
Yeah, wow.
It's super low molarity, right? So it doesn't actually really hurt or anything, but it is acidic enough where when I was in there to rearrange stuff to make sure everything was still okay and check on the fish, I would feel like warm and soft after I pulled my hand back out of the tank.
Wow, that's crazy. Are you keeping all the Pistogrammas in like biotope type conditions, or are they in kind of, I guess you'd call like a mixed sort of scenario?
Nowadays they're all in a big all one big system in a recirculating. The sump is maybe 40, and there are 12 cells in the whole system, but 4 tanks total. It's about 200 gallons, all combined. And I fill that with pure RO, and then I have my auto top off for the plant lowboys next door in the sump of the Episto system. So it constantly gets tiny water changes as evaporation happens in the plant tank. And then every so often I'll do a water change in there too, just to do a water change in there. But then every 3 days I'm also doing the plant tank, and I do a 50% water change in there, and then I refill with Episto water and then top off the sump after that.
At least down here in New Zealand, epistogrammas are often considered quite soft and sensitive. Is that something that you've experienced with them?
Not so much. If you're just trying to keep them, they tend to be pretty okay, and they're fairly easy to get on prepared foods too, in my experience. But breeding them is it has a wide range of difficulty. Most of them that you're getting closer to wild are probably pretty difficult to breed. And I've seen them be pretty adaptable to water conditions, but if you're liquid rock and you're keeping them like Africans, they're not going to do well.
Yeah.
How's your water out there?
We're fairly neutral, kind of for a wide range of stuff. Where I am, unfortunately, we've got nitrates in the water and it's a little bit dirty. But about 100 meters that way, if I was to be renting a building, the water is ridiculously cleaner. So, like, our town breaks into two this way, and I'm on that side. And like, if I'd gone the other way, then I'd be good to go. But that's okay.
Well, if it's just nitrates, you can do the opposite of what I'm doing and have a plant tank that you can change water into a system of, so that they can strip your water before it goes into a fish tank. And then you can refill with your high nitrate water for the plants. They'll eat it up.
Yeah, layout of the shop and tap systems, because I've thought about doing things like that, don't quite allow for that sort of movement, unfortunately, the way doors are situated and taps.
Fair enough.
Yeah, the closest tap to my shop tanks, I've got to drag like a 20-meter hose through the building, so it doesn't quite work, unfortunately. All of these things have gone through my mind. So that's unfortunate, but that is what it is. So yeah. Is there any specific care tips that you've found that keeping epistogrammas slightly more successful?
I wouldn't say so. I think my water here is a little too hard, so I've gone to RO since I moved here, away from the bay. This was about 3 years ago now. I never really had a problem with my tap water either, but I was super anal about water changes back then, and I've just been way too busy to be as anal about it recently, and I'd rather just have the RO. That way, if worst comes to worst and I need to top off with some tap water into that system, it's going to go from 15 to 30 ppm instead of already being at 250 and going up even more from there.
Cool. Is there any epistogramma species that you would love to keep that you currently haven't managed to get your hands on? You've seen somewhere that you just haven't managed to get your fingers with or hands on?
That makes me sad all the time, because we tend to be the last ones to get the nice new Epistos over here.
I can assure you, you are not the last ones. We are the last ones.
Fair enough.
There's a list of
Point
fish that we
taken.
can keep, and if it's not on the list, we can't have it. So I can assure you that we are the ones that suffer with that one.
Of the ones that do regularly get them, we are close to the end of the line, because in general, our keepers tend to want lower prices. And when something is brand new and never seen before in the hobby, it's the people that are willing to pay the high prices and then ship them to them. Because it doesn't really matter when you're exporting a wild fish where you're shipping it to, right? It's just going to go to the highest bidder and they're going to pay the shipping. So in my experience, most of the really nice things go to some Japanese folks and some German folks and probably some other European folks. And then eventually, when they've got a stock of them and they're breeding and they're, F2s or 3s, then we start seeing them over here on lists available for purchase. There are a few people that have friends that can get some wild stuff, and it is exciting sometimes, but I would say most of the new things that I see on Instagram, for example, are coming from Japan and Germany.
Mm-hmm. I find talking to people in different parts of the world regarding the different parts of the hobby so intriguing, and just the way that you've kind of described different sort of fish keeping over there to what we have here, and I'm just envisioning, people with just these immaculate 200 tank fish rooms with just single species of fish all the way through. And I need this as a full collecting type point of view. And over here in New Zealand, people do that, but it always seems a little bit more eclectic and a little bit more, I've got some of this and some of that, and nothing's kind of uniform, if that sort of makes sense. So I always find it really interesting hearing other people discuss different ways of fish keeping around the world.
Believe me, I'd love to have a fish room that had 200 tanks and probably some high school kid to take care of it and change all the water for me at that point too. Yeah. I would love to have that kind of a thing and have the ability to collect everything, but I don't. I'm also not super rich, which if I was, I'd definitely be doing that. But I have this guy, which I do like to show off. This 50-gallon is my way of doing that. I just kind of cleaned it up. So gave it a trim, and that's really what got me into plants too, is they don't move. They're all right here. They're growing. I can keep track of them really easily. And I can put 150 species in this 4-foot tank.
Mm-hmm. So what have you got in there at the moment for the people that will be listening to this after the video?
We'll be here a long time.
That's okay. We've got all the time in the world.
All right. Tell me when you want me to stop. I'll just start. I'll go down the rows.
Cool.
This here is Eriocolin species Toxylaus. Next to it is this Bucephalandra that I'm not sure, honestly, but it has this nice rainbow sheen. It's currently throwing up a flower. This is a Simolis species. Not 100% sure what it is either, but it has an affinity to Abractiatus. So that's sort of what I'm saying it is for now. We'll see. Oh, there's some Crypt Parva right here that I missed. Then there's Juncus repens. This is Bucephalandra Brownie Ghost 2011. There's Anubias Minima Dragonclaw behind it. This is Rotala Macrandra Mini Type 2. Cryptocorini Jacobsenii Pink. This is Bucephalandra Ketagon Godzilla. Staragini repens. This is Anubias Pinto. This is Eleocharis acicularis, the dwarf hairgrass. This is Nymphea gardneriana, Limnophila helferi, Hygrophila lancea aragaya, Staragini species Portobello. There's a little Bucephalandra variegata here. Then behind it, there's the pink flamingo crypt and another Pinto behind it. This is Gradiola vesicola. Hygro triflora, I believe, but I may be wrong there. There's some Crypt tropica there, Hygrophila pinnatifida, Ammonia pedicellata gold, and some more over here. This is the one that's actually looking the best. I'm shifting it over to rearrange and make room for more species. Rotala macrandra mini butterfly, Xyrus species red, Alternanthera, Renekii, Ocypus, Maiaca species Santarum red, Rotella indica here, Tonina fluviatilis, Limnophila species Bellem. I'm gonna have to replace this guy. I think I hit it too hard. This is Ludwigia sphaerocarpa mini, and I've got more in the lowboy that I can put back in. Merdania anglesii here, Hygrophila odora here, Crypt affinis metallic red. This is Loganandra meboldii pink cross silver powder. There's Marsilia crenata, that little clover down there. Ludwigia arcuata, Ludwigia repens cross glandulosa. There's Ludwigia species Metagrosso. This is Eriocolin species Vietnam. Rotella macrandra kochi. There's Maiaca species, can't remember. Down there, there's Crypt rosanervig. That's Crypt cordata rosanervig. Here's some more of that Simolis that I'm moving towards the back there. Let's see, there's Pogostemin sampsonii with the big leaves. This is Rotella species Nanjinshan with the narrow leaves here. There's Rotella macrandra mini type 4. Rotella species Bangladesh behind it. This is the sword is Echinodorus sukarno. It's actually throwing up a big flower here too. Rotella botsii behind it. This is Bacopa. There's Salzmanii on the left with the rounder leaves, and Caroliniana colorata on the right. And there's Limnophila repens. There's Ludwigia inclinata cuba. A baby Crypt rosanervig here. There's Eriocolin species Goyash. This is Holanthium vesuvius, the corkscrewy guy. This big guy here is Aponogeton crispus. I've had that since this was actually originally the Vietnam display tank for the show, and I've actually had that in there since I did that show. It was 6 years ago now.
Oh, wow. As we've been running through your plants, we had a comment from one of the viewers who basically said that your one tank probably has more species in it than we're able to get in the whole of New Zealand, which I think is a roundabout fair.
I hope not. I'd love for you to have more.
More has been coming recently with tissue culture, but we're severely lacking. There's definitely some in there that I'm 99% sure we've got, but most of them we don't.
Yeah, a lot of them are more common. I've kind of just, this tank I've been like throwing every single new species in that I get little by little until it has kind of amalgamated into this. I'm about halfway through. I'm happy to stop if you'd like.
Is that like a plant farm for you for future projects, or is that just one that you like to grow plants in?
No, this is just a display that I have, and every time I trim it, I put the top back in and I toss the bottom in the trash.
Yeah, okay, cool. We've had a couple more.
I can show you the farm if you'd like.
Cool. Yep, go for gold. We'll just continue with the questions while we're walking around. Someone has said, is there a soft G in the word Ludwigia? I thought there was a hard G. How do you pronounce Ludwigia?
I say Ludwigia, but that typically is because it's just easier. It's faster to say. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. It's just preference.
I always find different. Okay. Well, we've lost Luke for a little bit, so hopefully he pops back up soon after he realizes that he has disappeared. I always find it really interesting the different dialect between different countries and different accents and twangs and stuff like that happens. So, like we say Ludwigi, well, I say Ludwigia, and some people say Ludwigia, for example. Subwasatang is another one that's been brought up in the chat there from Zen. And I apologize for the issues that we've had because we don't have Luke with us anymore. Maybe a tour of his plant farm wasn't the most ideal thing to be happening. So, yeah. Oh, we're back. We're back. There we go.
Oh, shoot, I'm hearing you from my phone again, but give me 1 sec here.
Cool. We're all good to go. Yeah. Audio's working now.
This is the plant farm here.
Wow.
This is 2 low boys. This is the top and the bottom.
Cool.
And this is what I use for sales and new projects and this and that. So the other tank, I have to restrict all the plants' growth so that I can keep on having more and more species. This one, I kind of set a pot aside and it gets to grow all in that one. And I can trim it or I can pull it or whatever.
Cool. So how many different species do you think you've got going on through your plant farms, other than lots?
I think I've probably got about 60 or so species total in the low boy.
Wow. We've had a couple.
It's less than the tank outside, definitely, but they take more space.
We've had
more space.
A couple more questions come through. Someone would like to know: is your plant spreadsheet up to date?
Hey, fuck you, man. Get out of here. Go home.
Oh, there's your answer. And the next question is: what is your favorite substrate?
The cheapest one.
Fair enough.
This farm actually, since I need to be able to swap out pots and this and that, up top actually is the main. Since all of these are in pots and I have a bunch more pots, I need to be able to take it out and replace it. So it's whatever I've got on hand, but usually it's pea pebbles from Home Depot.
Cool.
I fertilize a lot and pretty often, so there's no real need for a super active substrate.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get into live plants and aquascaping?
I just had access. Another serendipitous thing that I dove into and that I found a pretty big love for. When I started working at the fish store, that store was the store that had a lot of plants. We were well known for bringing things in. The guy who owned it opened it in '73 and it closed last year. But he, back in the day, was the first one to bring in a few species to the US. So he was pretty proud of that. There was a big plant tank there, and being the guy that pretty much took care of everything, functionally, I was the one doing the water changes and fertilizing the plants and all that kind of stuff. So I sort of was just taking these things that were pretty beaten up and probably unsellable and taking them home and seeing if I could get them to grow. And I wasn't so good at it back then, maybe 50-50 success rate, but they were free and I just kind of got better. That tank that we had at that store was 12 foot by 6 foot of plants. So that's about
Pretty big.
3.5 by 2 meters.
Yeah, that's a fairly large plant tank.
Yeah. Yeah, that one was a bear to pump CO2 into and all of that kind of stuff. We'd run through a 20-pound CO2 tank in, maybe 2 months or so.
Wow. How do you diffuse CO2 into something that large? Is it multiple diffusions through it or a reactor type system?
We kind of played with it while I was there, and I'm glad that I got to experiment on the store's dime at the time instead of my own, because when I got
Yeah.
to setting up my system, I knew which way I liked best and didn't have to waste all the time. At first, it was just those normal sintered ceramic pressed diffuser plates with a power head, and we'd have 4 of them because there were 4 cells of the plant tank and the power head in each one. And then it changed to these power head diffuser reactor kind of all-in-one things. It was a power head that had a low pressure tip for the CO2 bubbles to come in, and then the impeller was supposed to chop it up and make it more accessible to plants. And that thing sucked. It didn't work at all. But then we put on reactors. So we got Sarah products at the time, and Sarah's good, and I still use theirs now. Instead of building one, it's just easier to grab one off the shelf.
Yeah.
I just have a pump going to the reactor, and it chops stuff up, and then it's on the return line to the top pots. So these 2 systems are connected. This is the outflow. This is the drainage here, and the overflow. Not sure if you can see the bubbles. That's where the water's coming back down.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Cool. Do you sell them by the? Obviously, they look like they're little container type things. Do you sell them by the container or by like the cutting?
I usually sell them by the stem.
Yeah.
And then what you get is, well, you get a healthy thing, but how you get it is luck of the draw. If I really need to pull everything out and reset a pot, then you get a full rooted portion of whatever it is, and it's probably gonna be wrapped around the bag several times because it's too long and I need to do something about it. If not, then I take a trimming. It's probably 6 to 8 inches long. Unless it's a tiny plant, then it's 2 to 4 inches long.
What's your fertilizer regime for a system like that?
I fertilize when I change water, and I change water about 50-60% every 3 days. It's more so habit than anything else. I don't really want the GH and KH to keep on continuously going up, so I'm changing it out. But I just dump fertilizer in. My friend did it.
You might be gone again. Makes a difference for a change. It's not me with having technical difficulties, which is nice because we normally have me with technical difficulties on a Friday, but we don't today. Hopefully he will come back sooner or later. So you're stuck with me again. I hope we're enjoying this. I'm finding this very intriguing. Again, if you've got any more questions for Luke, please feel free to drop them into the comments down below, and we will continue to get back to them as we possibly can. I haven't brought it up yet, but here we go. I'm not going to bring it up yet either. Cool, you're back.
Yeah, I am back. I got a call. Sorry.
All right, cool. Yeah. So, what do you use, like dry salts for your fertilization, or a liquid, or is a particular brand that you like to use? How does that work for you?
So when I was still working at the store, a friend of mine started getting annoyed by the CChem regimen that we were doing with the 8 bottles and this and that. So he started making his own, and now he sells it. And from the beginning, I've been kind of testing and giving him feedback and telling him that I need special this or that thing. Give me no GH buffers, or don't give me this or whatever. But it's called Hector's Everything, and I use RO in these tanks, and it works pretty good. It has the buffers in it, so it'll take my 0 water to about 3 to 4 degrees GH and 1 to 1.5 KH, and then it's all the nutrients too.
Cool. We've had a comment from the viewers. Someone has said, Luke, didn't you get your 5G implants, as you have dropped off a couple times? Yeah, okay, cool. Can you describe your first successful aquascape?
Well, I think it may be presumptuous to call my projects scapes, since they were the first tanks I'd set up, and they weren't particularly amazing as far as scapes go. But as a display, I would say that they were fairly successful. In terms of actually executing a scape, I think the first one that I thought looked good was a display that we had in the shop at the time. It was a little shallow 10-gallon rimless. We did banjo cats in there, which surprisingly didn't tear everything up. And then there were some endlers of some sort in there.
Cool.
And then, yeah, I think the most successful scape I've had was probably a little cube that had, it was dragonstone and some sand, had a lot of species in it. That one I submitted to AGA in 2022, I think it was. Didn't really win anything or whatnot, but it was there.
What do you enjoy the most about sort of aquascaping and setting up planted aquariums?
I couldn't tell you, honestly. I kind of enjoy the whole process. It's sort of, well, I kind of do everything fish, right? I started out just kind of casually having a couple tanks, but I worked at a fish store, and then from there I picked up a few clients, so I started servicing their aquariums, and now I moved to Sacramento, and I'm the president of the fish club, and I'm the speaker coordinator for the fish club also, and I have all of these plants and fish, and the most peaceful thing about any of it is the scaping, because nowadays there are enough tanks and enough plants where obviously like, oh, I don't want to do this, and that happens all the time. But when I finally sit down to do a scape and the day gets away from me, and suddenly it's 4 a.m. and I'm putting the final touches on some hardscape, and I'm like, oh, where did the time go? But I didn't notice it. And it feels like any other task that I do, I am in a rush. I got to get this done, so I got to get to the next thing and the next thing. And scaping is the only thing that I really do that can pause all of that.
Nice, very cool. You've segued couple of times, well, you've mentioned a couple of things that we can segue into as they're on my wee list of things to talk about. You run yourself a maintenance and servicing company. How's that come about for you?
I kind of feel bad saying that everything is happen chance, but it all sort of is. Just because I was working at the fish store at the time, and as a store, we didn't offer any services like that. So the owner told us as employees, like, yeah, if anyone wants it, you handle it. If you feel like doing it, you can do it. If not, you can shoo them away. I'm not hiring you to do anyone's service for them or whatever. So I just started doing it. And the first client I ever got was this older guy, and it totally made sense why he couldn't do all the work himself. And he just sort of stumbled into the store one day looking for someone to do it and told me about the setup, and that was my first client. And it was actually just a turtle. It was a diamondback terrapin that he kept fully aquatic in a Red Sea reefer. And I would go and change his water and clean the glass, and that's pretty much it. And this was from a second story, nowhere near a bathroom or anything. So I take a hose, I run it out, and I run it down to the first story and point it at his garden in the trees out front, and then let it drain. And, from that kind of a height difference, the drain is pretty quick.
It would be, yeah.
And then I attach that hose back on, and I pump water from his hose back in, and it was just come in, do an hour, give me $80. At the time, I was charging $80 an hour. And that's a lot more than $15 an hour at the fish store. So anytime people came in and told me about their systems, I was like, okay, yeah, sure, why not? And just sort of stacked them up here and there. And it's not an amazing living because I'm pickier than I should be with my clients, but being that I do this, and I have other part-time jobs that I can, I'm lucky in that I can sort of adjust my hours on. I can do more work if I need more cash, and I can just take time off and not get scheduled if I don't. Not lost on me that that's not possible for some people, but yeah. I don't have to get every single potential client that I come across. It's only people that I'm intrigued by their system, or they want me to do a full install, or that kind of a thing. So it's been slow growth, but over the past 4 years that I've been doing it, I've lost one client.
Oh, wow. That's not bad. 4 years. There's an interesting thing in business where you essentially either fire clients or become very picky on who you actually want to hire and who actually suit your methodology and suit your ethos. And it sounds very much like that's the way that you work as far as taking on your clientele. It's not every Tom, Dick, and Harry that knocks on the door and says, I need a water change done. There's a little bit more to it.
Yeah, there is. And I understand that I work in the service business and I'm going into people's houses, and that comes with a certain degree of ass kissing. But there's also a certain degree that I can't tolerate from myself. So it's kind of a fine line. And the one customer that I lost was not because they didn't want me to come anymore. It was because I didn't want to deal with him anymore. At the time, he wanted an install done, and then he wanted me to come back for more maintenance and stuff. So I told him, I'm busy right now. I will get to it, but within 2 months, I will get back to you with Escape. Right? I'll take your tank. It was a 2027, whatever the smallish bow front tank is that we have here. It's somewhere between 25 and 40 gallons. Not a super huge tank. I took it that day, and I told him within 2 months I'll bring it back. And within a week, he was pestering me about it.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, look, I told you it would be 2 months. If you want me to rush it, I can rush it. I can just throw some random shit in there, and you take it or leave it. And he was like, no, it's fine, 2 months. And then I was like, okay, cool. And then about a month after that, so a month and a week later, I was finished. I was like, okay, I'm going to bring it. So I brought it.
Mm-hmm.
And he immediately said, well, when can I put fish in it? Why didn't you bring me fish? I was like, well, because you told me I was going to be coming back once a month. And this tank is brand new because you wanted it here so quickly. It's not cycled or anything. You can't do anything. So you're just going to feed the tank as if there were fish in it. And next time I come back, I will bring you some fish because it should be fine. I put a bunch of plants in there, and you want some livestock, I'll put some shrimp in there. They may or may not do well because I don't know what exactly you're going to do. If you're dumping in half a jar of food every day, then everything's going to die regardless, right? This is an uncycled tank.
Yeah.
So I told him that, and then I went away. And then the next week, he called me again and said, everything is dead. What happened here? The water is super cloudy. All the fish died. And I was like, well, I didn't bring fish. So whatever you did, you can call whoever did it, and they can come back and fix it for you. I'm done with this.
Mm-hmm.
That was my experience that taught me to be picky about the clients that I take.
So what I've just heard there is that you took their aquarium and you were going to return it. So does that mean like you've literally set it up in your house, got it established, and then brought it back to them? And if that's the case, how does that work? Obviously, you're not going to pull everything apart to transport it. How do you transport it back when it's kind of set up?
So I actually have one. My first ever client that had the turtle tank, he recently, this last winter, his turtle died. And so he told me to set up this other tank, and it's getting installed tomorrow, actually.
Cool.
But
Cool.
I have it here. It's scaped, and the misting line sort of fell. If anyone was at Findig, you may have seen it. So pretend that misting line is not there, but this guy here is Paludarium. We're doing some Geosarma crabs in here, and I hardscaped it. The big rocks up in this region here and this island here are all siliconed and then pond and stone foamed, expanding foamed into place. And then everything below is sort of softer, and there are some river rocks. So they're all sort of just set in there. And I bring an extra guy so that we can lift the whole thing while it's scaped, because even drained, this thing is probably 150 pounds or so.
Yeah.
Bring an extra guy. I have these suction cups that stick on, and then you pump the air out of, and then you just kind of manhandle it in.
Is it a common methodology to have someone set the tank up and bring it in full like that, or are they normally set up on site? Like I've never really heard of that before, and it's very intriguing.
Because I'm mostly working with people in their houses, I don't really feel like spending the 8 to 12 hours it takes me to set up a tank in their house.
Yeah.
And there are some tanks where it's not really avoidable, but anything below 50 gallons or so, I prefer to take it home, and I bill it as I work on it. But it's much easier for me to work on it for an hour and then go and do whatever else that I need to and then come back to it, as opposed to spending a solid chunk of time inside someone else's house.
Yeah. do you find during the transport, like the escapes get sort of shaken around a little bit and misplaced to an extent? Or are they all pretty, excuse my pun, rock solid and don't move too far?
Well, you can see here the extent to which it gets shaken up, actually, because I just moved it to and from Findig. If you look closely at this guy, for example, some of those roots are exposed, some of the aqua soil kind of shifted around.
Yeah.
And there's a couple roots right here. And there's one plant here that got uprooted. And that's about the extent of it.
It's not bad. That's not bad at all.
When it's fully drained, it helps. If it's a long drive, like tomorrow, the install is about a 2-hour drive away.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then it needs to get misted while it's in transit. So I can either pull over if it's small enough where I can do it myself, or I have my assistant kind of turn around and just give it a spritz real quick, make sure nothing really dries out. And yeah, when you drain the tank fully, all the aqua soil kind of locks it into place, and it works surprisingly well. The thing that shuffled everything around is that someone hit the brakes really hard in front of me, so I had to hit the brakes behind him, and the river rocks kind of came forward. But it's a little bit disturbed. When I first set it up, it was a smooth substrate line, and you can kind of see, like right here, there's a little, and right here, there's a little. But that's about all the amount that the aqua soil moved around, and those are from the river rocks kind of whipping around and landing there. So it really it's a lot easier than a lot of people think.
Yeah. That's really intriguing. And I'm assuming that once you get into place, you'll just sort of touch it up and tidy the bits up that isn't quite where it was to get it back to where you wanted it to be.
Yeah, definitely. There's always maybe 15 minutes to half an hour of doing a manicure while it's on site. Yeah. These leaves kind of don't look so hot, and just snip them off real quick, or throw this rock back into place. But it never takes super long. I've never had escape just completely fall apart on me in transit before.
That is so incredibly intriguing. Like I've never ever considered that would be a way of setting up an escape in somebody's house or office or wherever it's going to go, as having it set up in a back room per se before the fact and moving it into place set up. That's really cool.
Yeah, I attribute my success in that regard to watching enough aquascaping videos and realizing that all these people that are big aquascapers are using probably a 2-to-1 ratio of rocks to glue, like the epoxy that they use to stick the rocks together. A lot of those people are really slathering that on there to make sure that everything is secure. And sometimes those scapes have to move. So if they can do it, I have to be able to figure out some way to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
And little pieces, the cigarette filter and liquid super glue trick that sets really fast. And then after you do that, you can kind of glob some more epoxy if necessary around it to make it stronger. Or expanding foam is super sticky, much stickier than silicone when it first comes out of the can. So it really keeps a lot of things in place.
Is there a specific expanding foam that you use, or particular stuff you're looking for it to contain or not contain for obviously aquarium use?
Not really. Granted, I couldn't tell you what the result would be over multiple years, because I don't think I've had any foam structures that have lived in a tank for longer than 2. But up to 2 years, it's totally fine. All of my fish were healthy and plants were healthy and all that. maybe as it breaks down, there are some harmful things, or maybe there are little bits that a fish could potentially eat, but I don't think I can necessarily speak to that. In terms of setting it up, if you can afford it, I like the Pond and Stone expanding foam because it's black, and there is a bit of a tweak in the formula where it's more made for constant water to be running over it, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference, to be honest. Mostly I just prefer the black. It is 3 to 4 times the price of the yellow stuff, but if you can afford it and you don't want to spend time, like you can't really see any expanding foam here, but I didn't mask it at all. It's all just exposed expanding foam if it's there. But it's kind of rock colored, and with water going over it, it is sort of hidden. Whereas with the yellow stuff, you have to make sure you rub the silicone on all the pieces of it after you carve it, after it's set, and then dab the sand on. And then if you miss a spot, then you have to silicone doesn't like to stick to itself after it's dried. So a lot of the time you like patch it, and then you put the sand back on it when you do the patch job, and then you run the thing, and then 3 months later that little button pops off, and then you have a piece of exposed foam under it. And, it works just fine. It didn't kill any of my fish or anything, but it's probably, well, if you count the time that you have to wait for the silicone to cure, that 24 to 48 hours, then it's got to be at least 10 times the time commitment if you use the yellow stuff.
Yeah. We've had another question from the floor. Have you tried the plastic beads that become moldable in warm water?
Those things suck. They're the worst.
I didn't even know they existed. It's probably another thing that's not over here. So,
if I'm not mistaken, it's more of a thing with the reefers than it is with the freshwater people. The epoxy putty in general is more of a thing with the reefers than it is with the freshwater people. Since they're all building precarious scapes that need to be globbed all together like that. That stuff is supposed to be a quote unquote reusable epoxy glue. It's basically, it's plastic beads, and they melt, and you kind of massage them into this hot glue kind of paste. And then you put it in between the rocks or whatever it is you're gluing, and it's supposed to set and stay solid as long as the temperature doesn't go up too much, which it shouldn't inside your aquarium.
In theory.
In reality, it's more like candle wax when it's hard.
Oh.
So I have not ever successfully stuck 2 pieces of anything together with that.
Interesting. The person that made the comment said, "Cool, I could never get them to work well either." So at least you know that it's not just you then.
No, as far as I know, it's not our problem. It's that stuff's problem.
That's the creative problem. Yeah.
I've never heard anything good about it.
Okay. Note to self: if I ever see it available, I won't buy it. Cool. You mentioned before that you're the president of the Sacramento Aquarium Society. How has that come about?
How indeed. I was just a guy who attended in 2020. In 2022, when the club had its first meeting back from COVID. I was just a guy, and I showed up. I had recently moved to Sacramento, and just sort of attended. And they were having some trouble filling up board spots at the time. So at the end of that year, they're like, oh no, it was 2021 that I was there. And then they told me to run for board because they were having trouble filling up the positions. But I ended up not, and just sort of attended the club again. The next year, they again had some trouble filling in the positions. And one of the old lifetime members of the club, who was the president at the time and did not want to be again, spoke to me and another friend of mine who were both just members of the club. And long story short, he became president and I became vice president.
Mm-hmm.
And the month before the vote was happening for us to be president, vice president, we ended up in Portland for their second Fishtoberfest event, which is analogous to our Findig that we just had, but it's up about a 9-hour drive north of me. And after we got back, we said, okay, yeah, we can, like, we'll be on the board, but the thing that we want to make happen is a convention down here from us. And we did. It happened. And it was our first time doing it. The club has actually thrown the Findig long ago, but the last one prior to us reviving it last year was in 2008. So we got it all done, fighting everyone else along the way because they were worried that this event was going to bankrupt us and a repeat of what happened in 2008 would happen. It would be bad. The club would lose a bunch of money. But we got it done. And a lot of the arguments around that kind of burned him out. And me too. But he got really fed up with it all and he left. No longer on the board at all. And so when the time came, they were like, why don't you be president? Like, you guys did pretty good this year. We made money at the convention and we made money this whole year overall. Like, you should just do it. So I was like, I guess if nobody else steps up, I guess I will do it. I really think that it should probably be someone who has A, been around longer in the club, and B, has more time in their daily lives to be dealing with all of this. But if no one else is going to do it, I'll do it. And no one else did it, so I did it. And my friend Nico, who was the other, who was not the friend mentioned earlier, but was also a pivotal driving force behind making the Findig successful last year. So the two of us that I mentioned before came up with the idea, and then Nico essentially coordinated it all from there. And we handled our tasks, but Nico was overarching, coordinating the event itself. And because that went well, they asked him to be vice president. So I kind of run the board meetings and do the day-to-day. And I'm also the speaker coordinator, so I'm the one arranging the speakers to come to give the lectures that we have at the meeting every month. So I would say I do more than he does in the day-to-day of the club. But for Findig, he was still the coordinator this year and was in charge of the entire thing. And this year, the entire team, the board, and some people who weren't even on the board that volunteered really were very helpful. There was a much smoother planning process as well as everything else than last year. So grateful to everyone for having helped out.
Do you guys have a guest speaker come into your meetings once a month? Is that what you were saying?
Yep.
Cool. I'm assuming they're people that are from outside of the club. Are they other from different states or different parts of the country, or how does that sort of work? We don't have that kind of thing down here.
We try to vary it up as best we can so that you're not hearing about the same or adjacent topics 2 months in a row. Mm-hmm. But we just sort of talk to people that have interesting things to say regarding the fish hobby, and we bring them in. They come from all over the place. There are some. We're blessed in our club that we have several people that are doctors in the field of fish.
Yeah.
So Dr. Eric Thomas as well as Dr. Ron Coleman are both active members of our club, and
Yeah, cool.
Dr. Eric Thomas does a lot of work with plecos as well as cories.
Mm-hmm.
He's fairly well known, and
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ron Coleman runs a cichlid research facility. He's fairly well known. So we have people that are very qualified that can take over and give a talk if somebody cancels or a family emergency, or I just couldn't find someone.
Life happens, sort of thing.
Yeah, and then typically we will share speakers with the San Francisco Aquarium Society, which is about a 2-hour drive away. They meet
Mhm.
on the first Friday of every month, and we meet on the first Saturday of every month. So most of the time it works out fairly well that they have their speaker fly into San Francisco, and I'm in the area servicing clients all day. And then I go to their meeting at night, pick up the speaker, bring him back to the hotel in Sacramento, pick him up the next morning and take him to our meeting. And then they fly out of Sacramento that night. And that way we're able to share the plane tickets. So we have a bit wider radius. That's an option to us to bring speakers to, or to bring speakers from.
Yeah.
And then once a year, hopefully, we are trying to do a bigger collaboration with with more of the clubs that are all up and down the coast.
Mm-hmm.
So last September, we had Andreas Tanke, who came from Germany and gave a talk to 9 different clubs, which without everybody having pitched in, it would have been quite a bit more difficult to get him a plane ticket all the way from over there, and how to arrange his hotel and this and that. So the pooling money to get the plane ticket to be cheaper was the main thing, the main success there. And for next year, we are, so we've already got our schedule filled for this year, and he was a little busy this year also. So we are talking to Dr. Leandro Souza for next year at some time.
Yep. Awesome. Cool. It's very impressive that you've got a whole year's with the schedule lined up in front of you. That's pretty cool.
Oh no, it's not me. Everybody, things work well. People agree to come, and we're grateful to them. We're able to get a good amount of people in the door at the meeting. That's super important. Club memberships and the people spending money at the auction are what allows us to keep on spending the money to bring these speakers in and to throw the Findig where people are coming and getting to talk to each other about the fish and all the other things that we do.
How many people are in the club?
I want to say that the total membership of the club is just north of 200. The average attendance of a meeting is probably around 80. And then when we have a bigger meeting, 60 to 80. There's definitely lower attendance when bad weather hits or good weather hits, or on a big meeting, like we'll have a mega auction twice a year, 3 times now, including the convention, where you're allowed to sell more items than you usually are per month, and we don't have a speaker, and it's just auction the entire time. Those meetings, we tend to have about 100 to 130 maybe people in the room.
Yeah. I just want to put it into a little bit of perspective for everybody. My local fish club, which is there's only one for my city, has a membership of 8 people or 7 people, I think. So just to put that into a little bit of perspective, that's why I think those numbers are quite impressive. Granted, far bigger area and catchment and that kind of stuff, but to hear that sort of number, great. I think it's pretty impressive.
And there are plenty of people that I don't know how well you know the California geography, but there are people coming from, fair enough. There are people that drive into monthly meetings that are coming from 2 to 3 hours away, and we get a good number of people in the door, and we're lucky that this actually seems to be a pretty big hub of fish keepers. There really are a lot of people around that are enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, it's really cool. Very cool indeed. Right. Let's just get back to where I was. I've been kind of engrossed in this conversation about clubs. Do you feel that the club scene is growing or decreasing where you are?
I think that in general, the hobby is probably seeing a downturn. I'd wager that's the case for a lot of places right now, since our economy has kind of slowed down. And obviously, the first things to go when you need to feed yourself still are going to be the aquariums that are unnecessary costs.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there has definitely been a downturn in the hobby, but the people that are coming to the meetings, which we have been getting still new members, and most of the people renew. So our numbers have been slowly and steadily increasing. But it used to be a lot of people that would come with a big fish room. We have people that have detached buildings that are 2,000 square feet for their fish. Wow. And those are old timers that have been around in the club for a while, right? But there are all these new people that are coming in the club who are younger, and that's awesome because that's how the hobby is going to continue forward. And I probably still count as one of those myself, but those people in general have one or two aquariums, and they're only looking for community things, community fish, and easy plants that can go into their community aquarium, which is great, right? That's how most of us get into keeping fish. But I've seen fewer people fall victim to multiple tank syndrome than I have in the past.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I think that's a relatively fair comment across the board. I totally agree with you that getting younger people interested and getting them into like clubs and stuff is the future, because once the old timers disappear, who continues to pick up the baton? But like one tank starts with two tank becomes three, and as people get a little bit older, more wiser, a bit more money comes through, that's when things like that sort of come about with multiple tank syndrome.
Yeah, definitely.
I think at least, you got to kind of start somewhere, I suppose.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And it depends on how hard that bug hits, so to speak.
Yeah, not everyone can go from 0 to 10 in the space of a month, Some people do that in the space of a year, or some never, or some do it in a day.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's actually brought us to the end of my structured questions that I have for you. Partly because as we've been talking, you've sort of touched on a lot of the stuff that I was going to ask, which has been fantastic. And we've kind of gone through these a lot quicker than I was expecting. So we like to end all of our coffee dates with a quick school of 6, which is 6 very short answer questions, and they're not really designed to put you on the spot. So hopefully we go okay with these. If you were doing a coin toss, do you call heads or tails?
Tails.
Are you a tea or a coffee drinker?
Both, but every single day starts with a liter of coffee. That's no question.
A liter of coffee. That is impressive.
Yes, sir. That's how big my French press is. That's how much I drink.
Hey, don't waste it. Are we alone in the universe?
I don't think that's possible. I don't believe we've come into contact with anyone else up to date, but I don't think it's possible for us to be truly alone.
Cool. That's fair. If you could have a meal with anybody alive, make-believe, dead, from any point in time and any point in history, who would that be?
And this is assuming there are no language barriers, right?
Correct. Just anybody you would like to speak to.
Well, most people alive are pretty easy to actually communicate with now. Maybe Takashi Amano. I feel like I'd like to get his to actually like hear him and ask some questions about his philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Paper, scissors, rocks. What's your first call?
Paper.
Cool. What's your unicorn fish or plant that you haven't had, been around, want to keep, want to propagate, want to spawn?
Oh God, there are so many. Whatever the next one I happen to catch a glimpse of is, there's no. Now I do kind of feel put on the spot. There's no end to the things that I want. There's only an end to my available square footage. Like,
That's a good answer.
there's this tank here that I haven't actually shown today, but this guy is like my paludarium that started the paludariums, and
wow, that's cool.
it's a nice thing, I like it a lot. This is a 24-inch by 18 by 18 Exoterra, and then it wasn't big enough, so I added an acrylic topper to it to add another 18 inches of height. And this thing has all the orchids and stuff, and there's a Monstera dubia up there, and this is the Philodendron squamiferum with the fuzzy petioles, and there's just random
Oh, dropped off again. Hopefully he pops back on again in a short second. If not, that'll basically be the end of what we've got. I hope you have enjoyed this, and I hope he does come back, because that was ridiculously cool. I've never been so much into the paludariums, but I can absolutely enjoy a quality one like that when I see them, and that is definitely quality. We'll try and get to the comment you've left, Koro, on recommending investing in one area. Luke is back. Cool.
I've had lots of issues with this today.
Yeah, appearing that way.
But yeah, this guy here is just endless collection of stuff. I couldn't tell you how much
in the past year or so. There's chai. This is Labija, and I just went to Japan last month.
Mm-hmm.
This month, actually, a couple weeks ago, I got back, and while I was there, I couldn't help myself, and I got some plants, and then I had the entire headache to deal with surrounding that, with the USDA permitting and the phyto and all of that stuff. But if anybody is curious, you are allowed to bring up to 12 plants without having to pay for an import permit or anything like that. You can do 12 individual plants in your carry-on, as long as you get all the paperwork done.
Cool.
So
we can bring in approximately 0 plants, regardless if we have paperwork or not.
Oh yeah, that was more for viewers on my side of the my side of the tub.
Yeah. Cool. We've had another question from the comments. Luke, if you were going to recommend investing in one area of plant/fish keeping first, what would it be? Lighting, CO2, fertilizers, filtration, or something else?
Sorry, repeat the first part.
If you were going to recommend investing in one area of plant or fish keeping first, what would it be?
Investing. CO2. That's the thing that is gonna. A lot of other things you can get on a budget and they'll work, and you can stack. Like this light that I have on here grows all these plants. These things, 24-inch LED bars, $60 for a pack of 8.
Cool.
There are a lot of things you can get on a budget, but if you get a cheap CO2 regulator I say if you want to do CO2, dive in, spend the money, get a regulator and a pressurized tank. People offer solutions like the citric acid baking soda or the yeast or whatever. None of them work consistently well. You're going to be frustrated, and then you're going to think, oh, CO2 sucks. It's not worth it. I'm getting better growth without in low tech. But you get the right regulator, you fully set up your CO2 so that it's actually consistent. And it, however works better for you, right? I've seen equally successful tanks that are just purely run on a timer, counting bubbles per second. And I've seen tanks that are looking good that are on a pH probe that drops at a certain amount and then shuts off the CO2 until it needs to turn it back on again. Both work as long as you can do it consistently, and those little things are just not consistent. So if you want to do CO2, I'd say just don't until you have the if you have a tank sitting around already, it's going to cost you about $250 to set it up. If you don't have a tank sitting around, then you have to pay the tank deposit fee. Then it'll cost you about $450 to set it up, depending on how big of a tank you get. But the next time you go back with a tank, you're not going to get charged a tank deposit fee. So to refill a pressurized tank, for me at least, a 5-pound, which is where I would probably start if I was new, costs $14 to refill, which is not incredibly expensive.
No, not for the return that you get from them. Cool. Okay, so that's brought us to the end of our stream. So thank you very much for being with us. Before we go, if people would like to find out more about you, where can they find you?
Probably on Instagram. I don't really post much elsewhere, and to be honest, I don't really post much on Instagram either. I think you were complaining about that earlier, Cam.
Yeah. Trying to find information on you was not the easiest thing that I've done ever. We'll put it that way.
I'm not very good at updating people about my life, and honestly, I think most of the things I do, most people wouldn't be interested in. So it's never really been at the forefront. I've never considered myself a social media person, and it's not like I really have a YouTube channel or anything like that that would pay to get myself more out there on. So I should probably be better about it. But yeah, my Instagram is vast_aquascaping, if anybody's interested.
Cool.
Every so often I'll post, but it's definitely my bad. But recently I haven't posted all that much aquarium stuff because I kind of walk around my tanks and nothing has really changed. And I'm like, okay, cool. But then one of the orchids is flowering or this or that. So it's not all aquarium stuff. It's just sort of whatever catches my eye.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's much appreciated. It's been fantastic and it has been very informative. Thank you for everybody that has been watching with us and been with the chat. Much appreciated as always. Until next time, thank you very much, and thank you very much for your time, Luke. It's been fantastic.
Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Great to talk. I'm always happy to chat with people that like fish and plants. I'm just not ever really the first one to open my mouth. So it's been great. It's been an honor to be on, Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. All right, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic evening or a fantastic morning where you are. Have a good one, team. Happy fish keeping, and catch you later.
See ya.